Novels had always felt to me truer than what was real, declares a character in Dream Count, the highly anticipated new novel by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
I would say that the theme is, really, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a human being? What really matters?
The Dream Count tour hits Lagos, Nigeria, where the award-winning author takes on the press and her fans. Her late mother's death played a role in the birth of Dream Count. She spoke more about this during a live session.
Because I think the overriding feeling is one of helplessness. You're sitting there, you want to write, but it's not happening. And by write, I mean creatively. Of course, I wrote essays, I wrote nonfiction, but the creative work, the imaginative writing just wasn't happening. And I was very unhappy. And actually, I said yes to many more invitations in that period because I wasn't writing. So I thought, well, I might as well just go give speeches, even though I was boring myself with the speeches. But the second phase, I think, of when Dream Count happened is, I knew when I started writing. I started writing after my mother died. And, just writing the first page, I knew that Dream Count was happening. I didn't have the title then, but I knew. But I also think that it became a different book because my mother died. I think if I did not have writer's block, and I wrote this 10 years ago, I think it would be a really different book. I think this book is very different from the rest of my work. I think it would be, losing my parents was devastating, and it changed me I feel that I'm a different person. I'm not the person who wrote Americana. I think Dream Count is much more vulnerable. I think the sentences are longer. So I think that I am less a dutiful daughter of literature in this book. So I was not interested in following all the rules that I learned in doing a writing program in the US. The US writing programs are they tell you that your sentences should be pared down, right? Just use only what you need. And that kind of utilitarian view for me, I'm done. I think maximalism matters. I think we should do it all because life is short, right? So honestly, and I think Dream Count, so my sentences being longer, my willingness to embrace language for its own sake, all of those things, I think happened because grief changed me. Grief made me different in so many ways. And yeah, but also obviously I think because you've read it, it's not a sad book.
This is not new to writers all over the world. Inspiration, challenges, searching for how to start and finish a book comes with the art. Her bond with her mother comes to the fore again. Her mother and her father took their time to read her books and surprisingly took notes. She also spoke about how her parents' death affected her.
I really felt my mother's spirit. My mother was a fiercely protective mother. My mother was the person my father read everything I wrote. My mother read maybe one or two. But she would tell everybody her books are the best in the world. She'd go everywhere with Half of the Yellow Sun in her bag when it was first published. And apropos of nothing, she'd bring it out. My daughter's new novel, Half of the Yellow Sun. So I really just feel that, my mother left so unexpectedly, and I think that I just feel that she helped me, that her spirit guided me. And so because of that, the book is not about my grief. If anything, it's about a door that had been closed to my creativity that my mother helped open. I don't even think, I'm not ready yet to write about losing my mother. It's still too painful. So I don't even think I could write anything about grief now. I adored my parents, and you know that, right? I was very much a daddy's girl in particular. And throughout my life, especially as my father got older, I worried about losing him. So I would think about, my God, what will life be like when dad is not here? And so I would do things like, my father would be telling a story and I would quietly put my phone on record because I just wanted to make sure I had many examples of his voice, that kind of thing. I would take many pictures of him, but with my mother, I just thought she would be here forever, which is to say that I took her for granted, which I think many of us do with our mothers, and which I think we should stop. And so I think losing my father was deeply difficult, but in a sense, unconsciously, perhaps I had been prepared for it. Losing my mother, no. I just, yeah, it was just, sometimes, even now I still think, wait, did it actually happen? And in my phone favorites, you have it's still, there's dad, there's mom, number 1 and 2. I cannot even think of erasing that. There's something strangely comforting about it. I think in the way that grief is a form of denial. Sometimes we need to think to ourselves, it didn't really happen. My mother was proud of me in a way that now I look back, I really needed, which was a kind of blind, encompassing pride. My father's was a lot more, was astute. He sometimes would read something and tell me, well, that doesn't quite make sense. It's true. When I gave my father the manuscript for Half of the Yellow Sun, he marked it up. He underlined some things.
Like a true professor.
He's a professor of statistics. So I wanted to say to him, not even, what do you know about it? But that generation, they were so well educated. So at Ibadan, my father went to Ibadan. So at Ibadan, he took classes in literature, even though his first degree was in pure mathematics. So he was a reader. So he would mark things up, and sometimes I'd be like, but often he had a point. I think, so I don't know if my mother would have read it, but I can tell you she would have been very proud of it. She'd have been seated right in front, looking very glamorous.
Dream Count, released in 2025, is a book that deals with several layers and characters that took an interesting turn while writing, and fiction still remains a favorite for her.
One of the things, for me at least, about writing fiction is I have to make up answers to a lot of the questions. There's a journalist outside who kept saying to me, tell us more about the theme. And, elaborate on the theme. And I thought, this kind of literature class approach to novels is not really something that creatives want to do. Which is why I think there's a difference between being a creative and being a critic. I don't always have the answers. I don't always have the whys. There's an almost spiritual aspect to writing fiction, at least for me. So there are things in the novel that surprised me. So I kind of thought the novel would go in a certain direction. It didn't. Did I plan to have it be so deeply about emotion and love? And I'm not even sure. I just, your characters speak to you, you're in there, you're writing, you forget time. It's almost magical. When you look up, you don't realize how much time has passed. This is the thing. This is why fiction is the love of my life. It gives me meaning. But it feels in some ways like a gift. I did not make it myself. It was given to me. But the choice I made was to use it. So I can't entirely explain to you why. It's what it is.
The book follows the feminine path, dealing with abuse, rape, and gender abuse.
I don't know how to do, you use the word delicately, maybe I would use, I think often when sometimes people approach certain subjects that are considered controversial, it's easier to do it in a way that is not direct, that is, look, I think literature should go there, right? I think literature is really our last frontier for telling us the truth about ourselves. Journalism doesn't really do it anymore because, for many reasons, journalism has become so sort of corporatized, and journalists are under such pressure, and there's so much you can't say, and you have to think about pleasing someone or not pleasing someone. Journalists in this country, I think, have stories they cannot tell for political reasons. And it's the same in the EU, everywhere really. And so really I think that literature is the last frontier, and we have to, if we are going to write about these subjects, we have to write about them in a way that is deeply honest, even if it means the possibility of making people uncomfortable, right? Because otherwise, what's the point? I think, why bother, really? Literature, what literature has done for me as a reader is that it's kind of opened the door for me to think about issues in a way that's much deeper and that nothing else can do for you. Film cannot do that. Art, visual art cannot do that. Music cannot do that. Only literature can. Literature takes us inside. And so but also just my nature, I don't know how not to be direct.
The writing style focused on characters who collide at the end.
And I actually wrote it in that way. So I wrote it in the way that it is in the book. I think because I wanted to have different voices. So one wonderful thing about fiction, of course, is that when you get past those really deeply, almost spiritual moments when the characters are leading you, I've always felt that the novel is greater than the novelist. Right? But there are also moments when you're just the novelist and you decide to sneak in your own things. And I did that in a novel about 4 places. I won't tell you the other 3. But one of them is especially the scene with American academia, about American academia, which of course, I know a bit about because it's a world that I inhabited for a while. And yes, I think that there's a part of me that just wants it to be better. I think a lot of my critical views about most things, really, they come from love. They come from, it's something I care about and I want it to be better.
Here is how she survived her university days and finally traveled to the US.
Going to a liberal arts college in the US was really one of the highlights of my life. I felt so grateful to be able to study. After secondary school in Osaka, science class, and I did well, but I was so bored. Biology bored me to death. I mean, God bless you all biologists here. And, and then I started studying medicine and I was so bored. And then going to the US, suddenly I could take classes in philosophy, in politics, in history, and I just loved that. I think that American liberal arts kind of structure I loved. But something is changing in American academia. It's closing, it's becoming small. We're very practical people. I cannot tell you, maybe about 10 different Nigerians have said to me, Chiamaka, is she all right? Is she okay? But on the other hand, Westerners will say, oh my God, I dream like she dreams. So, my people don't have time for rubbish, right? They're like, you saw a good man and you're still dreaming. Anyway, I think Chia is misunderstood, but we can talk about that later. But someone agrees. I feel like she's misunderstood. But no, I wanted these different women. Omelogo, I think Omelogo in some ways is kainene.
I think that's why, yes, I agree with you, but go on.
So I have that person in me all the time. But, and then I wanted to have different women. I felt that, really to tell the story of a broad range of women and also of contradiction, right? So, which is to say that I didn't want to write an ideologically good book. So people who talk about my feminism, I think there are people who would make the case that the novel is not actually appropriately feminist.
That was my next question.
Right? Which makes me happy because I don't want it to be appropriately feminist. I want to be honest about women's lives, right? I want to be true. I want to tell the truth. And the truth is that life doesn't always follow the ideological paths that we want it to. That all of us are full of contradictions. I might believe in something intellectually, but I'll make a choice in my life that goes against that belief. And that's what life is, So, and I think I also wanted to write about faith, like a believer, in a way that is a bit more grown up than I have done in the past. I think my instinct has always been to mock religion and to sort of talk about all the things that are bad about it. And there are many things, and we should talk about them. But I kind of felt, and again, I suppose this is also a consequence of grief, that there is more to it, that it's more nuanced, and that there are people like Zikora for whom faith is a great source of meaning and comfort.
Dream Count, Adichie asserts, is really about her mother, composed of the interlocking stories of 4 women. The women are immigrants in the US, Chia, a travel writer, Zikora, a lawyer, Omalago, a former banker turned grad student, are Nigerians. Kadiatu, a hotel maid, is from Guinea.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.